Hello there, friends. Welcome back to the channel. It's day 4 of Inktober, and it is the fourth illustration out of the 31 for this month. Today's topic was exotic. This time, I'm sticking with the theme. Going with the theme, this is a post apocalyptic world which I'm making for this Inktober. There have been some sort of these mysterious wars which have ravaged throughout the whole world and have destroyed much of it as we know of it. Our protagonist here has taken shelter in the woods, in the mountains. So he is in a very remote place. In a remote place, obviously, if you are getting canned food, any kind of canned food, such as spaghetti and meatballs in this case, it's obviously going to be a very exotic meal for someone. Having a fire to warm yourself is also very essential in the woods, especially with the night falling so soon and it being so chilly during the October months. And that is exactly what I'm drawing for today. Grab a cup of coffee, enjoy the illustration, and let's talk about lighting as today's subject for the podcast. Lighting is very important for your illustrations. I mean, there are multiple aspects to your illustration. We have talked about human anatomy, we have talked about drapery and clothing and textures of different things. Things where you are taking reference from pictures, from actual imagery, and creating a visual library. Now, coming to lighting is a bit different in this case. Lighting is not something which you can exactly refer to and replicate. No. Lighting is something which you need to learn. There are not only techniques or patterns to be learned here, but the actual act of being able to analyze different lighting scenarios. As I had said about clothing and drapery, it can be unpredictable. The way they fold, the way they behave on a body, on an object, it can be unpredictable, but there are patterns which you can replicate. However, in lighting, it is a bit different. Lighting is not unpredictable. It is quite predictable because the surfaces which your character or your surroundings have, they are going to remain constant, or your character might be moving. But the planes on which the light reflects, the planes by which the light is blocked, they need to be established, especially when you have a static light source. For example, in this case, in this illustration, I will be having the fire as my sole light source. And as the illustration progresses, I'll tell you how I have decided upon the lighting. But for now, let's discuss about a more global lighting scenario. If a scene is brightly lit by the sun itself, the sun is the largest source of light for planet Earth, and obviously it is brighter than every other star in our solar system. So obviously the light which comes from the sun will provide this global level of illumination which needs to be covered in a very predictable manner. For instance, when the sun is rising, the sunlight is not yet at its full strength. So obviously the shadows which are cast are much softer and the light intensity is low. So your scene might not be so brightly lit. However, on the horizon, as the sun rises, the sky gradually starts becoming brighter and brighter, and so does the Earth's surface. So anything that is on the surface during the daytime till midday, it can be pretty brightly lit. Once we cross midday, once we cross 12 p.m., what starts happening is the sun starts setting. And as the sun starts setting, the angle at which the sunlight falls becomes sharper and sharper. So the angle actually reduces, and what starts happening is the shadows start becoming longer. You get really short shadows as you approach 12 p.m. And again, the shadows start becoming longer as you go farther from it. Finally, during sunset, the light is again very soft, and you can get these soft shadows again during those last few moments when sunlight is there. This is a very simple way in which I have explained global illumination by the sunlight. What about in a room? In case of an enclosed room, for instance, you might have LED tube light, a fluorescent tube light, an incandescent light bulb, these kind of sources, or even a candle or a fireplace. What happens with these light sources is that they are very static. So the shadow which is cast is always in a single direction because the light is static and it is casting a constant bright light onto your subject. So your subject will always be lit from the direction in which the light source is and will always keep casting a shadow in the opposite direction. And this is very important when you're drawing scenes, especially in rooms, in front of a fire, in front of a fireplace, and any artificially lit scenario. So it is something essential to be kept in mind. Again, the way light works is very important. Remember one thing, that light can pass through objects. Not everything you are going to draw in a specific scene is going to be opaque. Not everything will be casting a shadow. There will be many things such as windows, objects made of glass, or translucent objects, which will allow some or even a lot of light through them. If you're drawing colored images, if you're drawing digitally, one thing which will make your drawings stand out, especially if you're drawing human skin, is subsurface scattering of light. Remember one thing, that the human skin, even though it might seem or look very opaque, it is not. Light can pass through the human skin. And depending upon the complexion of the skin, you can actually see light passing through the human skin and even some of the blood vessels just beneath the skin. This is called subsurface scattering. It is very important when you draw colored images to incorporate this into your artworks. Even when you're drawing black and white images, what we very often see is that the faces or hands can become very opaque. But let me tell you, it's not always the case. There can be a very, very subtle sort of lighting around the outlines of the face or the hands. And it can add just that bit of natural feel to illustration. Now remember, illustration is more about conveying your concept rather than making it lifelike. We are not aiming for realism at all times. It's more so about a believable and relatable concept. So to make your concept or your idea believable, your character, your scenery believable, what you need is to take inspiration from real life, and you can get this only if you're familiarizing yourself with the concepts. Lighting makes everything. It can make or break anything, in fact. In this illustration at this point, I have proceeded into deciding how the lighting is going to be. Textures are another thing which are highlighted by light. Light brings out the texture in different things. So the surfaces which are brightly lit might sometimes look overexposed if you're clicking an image, and you can get this effect in your illustration, in your drawing, by adding very less texture to the areas which are very bright. Areas which are lit by a medium intensity light or by reflected or refracted light, they are more detailed in terms of texture, because a medium intensity light is going to bring out those fine and subtle textures in your artwork. I use dry brush techniques here in places where I feel that the light has become a bit dimmer, and these are places where the texture actually starts becoming more visible. The texture on his cap, on his jacket, on his gloves, it starts becoming more visible. And again, the texture fades away into complete darkness as the intensity of light goes down. Now again, coming to global illumination. Global illumination is something which is done by lighting around the area, around the region where it exists. So here the source of light, the fireplace, the bonfire, the campfire, whatever you call it, it is also emitting light around the surroundings. So we can see some of it getting bounced back from those trees in the distance, some of it bouncing back from the tent which is just behind him. And as you can see, I just highlighted about the textures. The areas which are really bright, I have tried not to add much texture in those regions, because obviously I want them to look a bit overexposed in the final image, and I am not adding much texture to it. However, the middle regions are more textured, and finally it all fades into black, into complete darkness and shadow. In the distance, it is darker and darker. So everything fading into black ultimately gives you sort of a vignette kind of look, where your frame is surrounded by darkness, but the middle of your frame, of your picture, is actually well lit by the source of light. Now remember one thing, when you are drawing fire, when you are illustrating fire in black and white, it will mostly be white with very few details. You don't need to try to add much texture to it. In fact, because fire in black and white scenarios, even in black and white pictures, it will more or less look very, very bright. If you have color, if you're more adept to drawing with color, what you will find is a bit difficulty in avoiding this. Even I used to face this difficulty when I initially started. I initially shifted from drawing in full color to just drawing with black and white. What you need to avoid is that feeling of I should use a bright yellow, I should use a bright red. Yellow is not replaced by gray, let me tell you. Yellow is replaced by this very, very faint wash of gray. Remember, wash of gray, not a wash of black, but a wash of gray. So you can just imagine how light it will be. The best practice, which I find, especially for quick illustrations, is to leave it white and leave it bright. I hope these tips are useful in your art journey and you are able to understand lighting a bit better. One of the best ways in which you can study lighting is obviously to practice more, observe the things around you, and to be more vigilant about how exactly you are placing the objects around in your illustration and where the light source exactly is. I hope you enjoyed this illustration. I'll see you tomorrow in the next video. Take care. Peace.